Hi, how's it going? This is Resident of Collinwood for YouTube, back with my final Dark Shadows episode review for tonight. It's episode 30. Narrated by Alexander Mokiels, written by Art Wallace, and directed by John Sedgwick. We have our first official ghost sighting in episode 30. Victoria, this is a really good. Before we get Victoria coming down the steps, this is a really good shot setting by John Sedgwick and Dan Curtis Productions. Getting the shot of the entire drawing room set as they pan, from the center, almost to the center of the room, and they pan the camera to the right, and they take you out into the foyer, and you see the staircase, obviously, and you see Victoria Winters, Alexander's character, coming down the steps. It's a beautiful tracking shot, though we don't get a character in it right away. It's a great shot. And Vicky, she realizes she's alone. She's all alone in the house. And, she goes into the drawing room, and pretty soon the lights go out. She lights a candle. She hears the drawing room doors open, and there, standing there, is a ghost. Now you notice we hear Josette's music in this, or the ghostly eerie music that goes with Josette when she comes out of the portrait. I love that we get that music, but I don't believe this is Josette's ghost right here. I just don't think. I just don't believe it is. And now, to be clear, it's not Bill Malloy's ghost. Bill Malloy is still alive at this point. Also, now, could it be Josette's ghost? That's the thing. We've already had a mention of the character. I mean, so who's to say? I personally don't think it's Josette's ghost, in my opinion. So there's that. Vicky asks who's there, and then we get a flash of thunder and lightning, and it lights up the drawing room, and then no one's there. The lights come back on. Vicky goes out into back from the drawing room to the foyer, and as she's going up, she hears a sound, hears a door. We see the door to the kitchen come open, and it's Roger. It's Roger Collins. She said, "Did you just come in?" And he said, "Yeah, I just barely beat the storm." She goes, I thought I saw somebody, and he says, "You probably saw me. I was getting the fuse to go down. I was changing the fuse in the fuse box." So that's why the power came on. Roger changed the fuse in the fuse box. Good for him. Good for him. Good old Uncle Roger, right? Not Vicky's uncle, but still. She said that she hollered out that nobody answered. She goes, I didn't hear you. That's what's funny. He says that he acts like he crossed into the drawing room. I don't think he did. I don't think he did at all. But that's just me. Craziness. So, they talk about David still being missing, and Roger comments that, is Carolyn part of the search party too? And Vicky does tell him that, finally breaks the news to Roger that David was the one who did it. David was the one who tried to tampered with Roger's break. As soon as I not jumble my words here, Roger's in disbelief and shock, and who wouldn't be, right? I mean, he's a 9-year-old kid. They have their problems, but still. Roger asks, "Is she sure?" Vicky tells him, "You showed me a drawing of it yourself." I think That's crazy. Once we get to Burke Devlin's hotel room, the thunderstorm is still going, and Burke eventually just tell. By the way, Burke does put the bleeder valve in his pants pocket, which I like. Before David comes back uh, out of the kitchen, or no, sorry, out of the bathroom. He tells David the storm is still going. Remember, the bleeder valve is in in Burke's pants pocket. After a while, Burke says, "I'm going to take you back home." David, looks for the bleeder valve, but it's not there. It's not in the couch cushion. You pronounce my words correctly. I really love the scenes how they light how they light the inside of the cars. At first, it's real dark, and then you see inside the cars, and it's lit up really nice. The black and white gives it a good feel too, as Burke's driving, and Burke's telling what they'll do. When David gets back, oh, they'll holler at you, spank you, probably send you to Bell Pound supper, but uh, it'll all be over with pretty quickly. David, he's not too. No, David knows better. David knows why he really ran away. And David wants to go back to the hotel room that he left something there, and Burke's like, "Well, what is it? I'll get it tomorrow or another day." And David just says, "Oh, nothing." And Burke looks sort of glance at just drives, and Vicky and Roger back in the drawing room again. What I love most here is, or sorry, in her room. What I love most is that Vicky shows him the magazine of where David was going to, where David had the thumb. It was a very well thumbed page where he took out the bleeder valve, how to take care of it, how to take it apart. And Roger's line is, "I don't know whether to thank you or hate you." Like, dude, seriously, like, Roger, dude, buddy, let's have this conversation like we're civil. Um, there's a knock at the door, and Vicky goes, "David," and they open they get him and Vicky and Roger get down back to the foyer, and Vicky opens the door, and it is Mr. Devlin, it is Burke Devlin, and his new BFF, David Collins. Roger is yelling at his son instantly. Burke says the boy's frightened. Well, he should be frightened. They go into the. Roger actually thanks Burke for finding David, and they go into the drawing room. And Burke says, I'd love to know what's going on in that room." Burke also does eventually tell, after we go into the drawing room, we get Roger interrogating David up and down. He knows David did it. He realizes what Vicky's saying is true. He tells David, "Well, you could have stayed here. You didn't have, if it wasn't true and told me yourself. Um, you would have just believed her." And then David tries to swerve that it was Vicky who did it, and Roger ain't having none of that. And it's just a great back and forth between Louis Edmonds and David Hennessy. David Collins always loved playing those little mind games, and back out in the foyer, sorry. You get a comment about the grandfather clock that is out in the foyer. Bert comments about the clock. It's probably over 300 years old. It's probably one of the first pieces of furniture put in there. which is really cool. Um, I bet it's seen some sights in its day. And Victoria says, "Oh, I think you ought to leave." And he goes, the advice I gave you when I first met you, when I first gave you a lift into town, was to leave. Well, I think you ought to leave because if my guess is correct about what's going on there, you're living in a madhouse. And Burke's real concern is now Vicky in a sense because here's this woman who should not be here in his mind. Um, the drawing room doors open up after a while, and we get Roger. Vicky is ushered in, and she tells David, that I know where I found the bleeder valve. It was in your dresser drawer, and they back and forth. Roger and Vicky hound David, and what you really get is by the end of this is Burke saying, "Excuse me," and he pulls out the bleeder valve. "Are you looking for this?" He pulls it out of his pocket. And that's the end of the episode. I think the really interesting thing too here. So, why don't, it's easy to see why Dark Shadows sort of picks this episode to do its ghost. Because again, with DS, there's many themes with Dark Shadows, but one of the most important themes is character interaction. And what I mean by that is when you have characters who have either been mentioned in previous episodes or shown, you have a lot of character interaction, characters doing a lot of different things, and basically characters being busy. And maybe that's how I should have worded this, but you have characters who, okay, think about it. Vicky found the bleeder valve in David's room. But notice what Victoria doesn't say in this episode after seeing a ghost. She doesn't say she saw a ghost. And that's what I'm trying to get at. So I apologize for beating around the bush. That the reason it's easy to see why Vicky doesn't say it in this episode. It's because so much has gone on, so much is going to go on in this episode that you really have no real reason to bring it up. Where anybody's going to dismiss you as, well, you were just scared because you were home alone in this gothic old house. Which, true, but still. It's just a great way for Dark Shadows to slip a ghost in this episode. And it's a really, really good episode for Devlin to show that, since Roger wants to, to me, this is Bert getting back at Roger for having the sheriff search his apartment. I think that's why he did it. Yeah, I do think he cares for David, but I also think there's another reason he did that too, and I gave my reason. Smooth character Bert Devlin is. I find it really interesting that the way they had at the end of because at the end of the previous episode they had Bert Devlin find the valve, and I find it really. I've always found it really interesting with this episode that Burke spends a really good time in thought. When you go back and watch this episode, when Burke's in his room, he spends a good deal of thought of, my God, and you could tell sort of that he's thinking about what David really did and how crazy that is. Guys. But really great episode. It's a lot of fun to watch. Again, directed by John Sedgwick, written by Art Wallace, narrated by Alexander Molkhaus. Really, really fun episode. Go check out episode 30 if you haven't. You guys have a good night.